This is why you must stay silent. There is power in silence, for in it the mind gathers its greatest strength. Speak less and observe more. Every word wasted is energy lost. The wise man listens, learns, and strikes with precision, not noise. Your silence will confuse enemies and attract opportunity alike. In quiet moments, the seed of greatness begins to grow. 1. Silence sharpens your awareness and heightens your intuition. 2. Speaking less protects your plans from premature judgment. 3. Quiet confidence is more powerful than loud insecurity. 4. Silence disarms critics and confuses manipulators. 5. Observation in silence reveals truths hidden by noise. 6. Your silence creates space for wisdom to rise within. Silence sharpens your awareness and heightens your intuition. This is not just a poetic idea, but a practical, powerful truth that has shaped the lives of many of the world's most successful people. When you begin to remove the noise from your life, something incredible starts to happen. Your mind clears, your vision sharpens, and you begin to hear the quiet whispers of insight that were once drowned out by the constant chatter of the outside world. Most people move through life reacting, talking, and explaining themselves constantly. They believe that speaking more will help them be understood, that filling the air with words will show others how smart they are, or how important their ideas might be. But in that very act, they miss the golden truth. Growth doesn't happen in the noise, it happens in the silence. The moment you choose to withdraw your voice from the unnecessary, you give your inner voice permission to speak louder. And what that voice tells you is often more valuable than anything someone else might offer. You begin to pick up on things you never noticed before. People's intentions, hidden opportunities, subtle signs from the universe that were always there, but you were too distracted to see. You start to hear the tone behind someone's words, not just the words themselves. You begin to notice the look in someone's eyes when they speak, the tension in their body, the energy in a room, all the things that words can never fully explain. That's the magic of silence. It trains your senses to become more refined, your thinking more deliberate, your decisions more intentional. When you stop speaking just to fill time, your words begin to carry more weight when you do choose to speak. People listen more carefully. They respect your presence because your silence has taught them that when you open your mouth, it matters. But beyond what others see, it's what happens inside you that matters most. In silence, your mind is free to wander deeper. Your intuition, that quiet knowing we all have, is no longer drowned out by external voices. Intuition is the compass of successful people. It's that feeling that tells you to walk away when a deal looks perfect on paper but feels wrong in your gut. It's the sense that guides you toward a decision others may not understand, but later recognize as genius, and it only becomes stronger in silence. Think about this: the greatest inventions, the boldest ideas, the deepest self-realizations, they rarely come in the middle of a crowded room or during a heated conversation. They come in solitude, in reflection. In those quiet moments when the world slows down and your thoughts can stretch out without resistance. The noise of life, the distractions of modern society, these are the greatest thieves of intuition. You cannot hear the whisper of your heart when the world is shouting at you from every direction. But when you step back, turn down the volume, and allow yourself to be still, suddenly that whisper becomes a voice, and that voice guides you to things logic cannot touch. Silence is not weakness. In fact, silence requires more strength than speaking. It takes discipline to remain quiet when provoked. It takes wisdom to know that not every opinion needs to be shared, that not every question demands an answer. In a world addicted to noise and attention, choosing silence is rebellion, and it is in this rebellion that you find your edge. While others reveal their insecurities through endless talk, you reveal your power through calm observation. You don't need to tell people who you are. Your silence becomes your identity. It speaks for you. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need your validation to prove it. This level of self-assuredness is magnetic. It draws respect, it inspires trust, and it sets you apart from the masses who speak simply because they fear being forgotten. You, however, understand that in silence you're not forgotten. You are remembered more vividly, because while noise fades, silence lingers. It leaves an impression. It echoes long after the moment has passed. Silence also gives you time to analyze, to see the chessboard of life from a higher perspective. It allows you to make strategic moves instead of emotional ones. When you're silent, you're not just hearing what others say, you're decoding it. You're looking for the gaps, the inconsistencies, the hidden motives. You're not just responding, you're learning, you're collecting information, you're positioning yourself to win. And that's what the great minds have always done. They listened more than they spoke. They observed more than they reacted. They used silence as their greatest tool, not just to guard their plans, but to understand the world more deeply. In fact, the more silent you become, the more you start to notice how loud the world really is. Everyone is rushing to speak, to post, to shout their message to the world, but very few are truly listening. Very few are watching. Very few are taking the time to sharpen their awareness so they can make decisions from a place of clarity instead of confusion. That is your advantage. Your silence becomes the sharpening stone for your mind. It hones your instincts. It gives you a calmness under pressure that others admire but can't explain. They don't realize that your power comes from the time you've spent alone, thinking, observing, and preparing. You're not just reacting, you're crafting your next move with care, and that level of preparation, that depth of thought, cannot come from constant talking. It can only come from silence. In that stillness, you also begin to separate what's important from what's merely urgent. You stop chasing everything and start focusing on what truly matters. You begin to notice where your energy is being wasted and where it's best invested. You become intentional with your words, your actions, and your time. And with that level of intention, your life begins to align. You attract better opportunities, better people, and better outcomes, not because you're lucky, but because your awareness has been elevated through silence. Even spiritually, silence plays a sacred role. It is in silence that people pray, meditate, reflect. It is in the quiet moments that people feel connected to something greater than themselves. Whether you call it God, the universe, your higher self, it speaks not through noise, but through stillness. And when you make time for silence, you invite that guidance into your life. You begin to see that some answers cannot be found in books or conversations. They must be felt. And to feel them, you must first quiet the world around you. If you've ever sat alone in a room with no phone, no distractions, just your thoughts, you know it's not always easy. At first, your mind races. It brings up fears, regrets, unanswered questions. But if you sit long enough, past the discomfort, you reach a point of clarity. Your thoughts settle like dust in a glass of water, and in that clear space, insight is born. You begin to hear the truth, not the opinions of others, not the expectations of society, but your own truth. That truth becomes your foundation. That truth becomes your power. So yes, silence sharpens your awareness and heightens your intuition, but more than that, it transforms you. It gives you depth in a shallow world. It gives you strength in moments of uncertainty. It gives you control when emotions try to take over. And most importantly, it connects you to yourself. That connection is your anchor. When others are lost in the noise, you'll stand firm in your clarity. When others are guessing, you'll know, and that knowing will guide you farther than any loud opinion ever could. Make silence your ally. Make it your training ground, return to it often, let it teach you, protect you, and elevate you, because in silence you don't just find peace, you find power. Speaking less protects your plans from premature judgment, and in a world where everyone is in a hurry to show, to tell, to prove, those who master the art of restraint gain an advantage far beyond what the noisy crowd can imagine. When you speak too soon about your dreams, your goals, your strategies, you invite opinions, criticism, doubts, envy, and energies that can weaken your resolve before you've even taken your first step. Not because people are always malicious, but because not everyone can see what you see. When you share your vision before it's mature, it becomes exposed, vulnerable to misunderstanding, discouragement, and even sabotage. There's a sacredness in your ideas, especially in their infancy. They're fragile like seedlings. You wouldn't plant a seed and then dig it up the next day to show it to someone, would you? Of course not. You'd protect it, water it quietly, let it grow underground where no one sees it, until the day it breaks through the soil with strength and purpose. In the same way, your dreams need time to develop in silence. Every time you talk about them prematurely, you're letting energy escape. You're giving away your fire, your momentum, your edge. People will question you, project their fears onto you, ask you to explain what you're not yet ready to explain, and often they'll do it with the best intentions. But their limitations can plant seeds of doubt in your mind, slowing you down, confusing your clarity. That's why speaking less is protection. It's not about secrecy rooted in fear. It's about strategy rooted in wisdom. When your moves are quiet, your confidence builds in private. You get to test, to fail, to adjust without the pressure of outside eyes watching every step. That freedom is powerful. It keeps you honest, focused, and most importantly, aligned with your own vision rather than being swayed by the opinions of others. People love to analyze, dissect, and offer feedback, but not everyone deserves access to your blueprint. Some will try to imitate it, others will criticize it, and many won't even understand it. That's okay. It's not their job to understand, it's yours to execute. And the fewer distractions you have from external noise, the sharper your execution becomes. Now, imagine telling someone your big goal. Let's say you want to build a company, write a book, start a movement, and instead of support, they smirk. Ask how you'll manage that. List all the reasons why it's risky. If you're not rock solid in your belief, that tiny reaction can derail you. Words are powerful. They carry energy. When you speak your vision out loud, that energy can either multiply or weaken, depending on who hears it and how they respond. That's why discretion is your shield. It keeps your inner fire protected from winds that might blow it out. And more than that, it keeps you focused on the process rather than the performance. When you're not concerned about impressing anyone, you're free to pour everything into the work itself. You don't have to worry about updates, appearances, or justifications. You just do the work. You let your results speak later. The greatest creators, leaders, inventors, they all understood this principle. They didn't announce every move. They made the move and then let the world catch up. Think about the surprise of a masterpiece suddenly unveiled, a product launched with impact, a shift in the marketplace no one saw coming. That's the power of silent action. It hits harder because no one saw it coming. It wasn't diluted by talk. It wasn't weakened by doubt. It was forged in private and delivered with strength. And that strength comes from discipline. The discipline to know that not everything needs to be shared, that silence is not emptiness, but a container of potential. It's the space where ideas are formed, tested, refined, and transformed into something real. You begin to see that what you don't say often holds more power than what you do. You protect your energy by keeping it close, and you choose wisely when, where, and with whom you speak. And this kind of control over your words gives you greater control over your life. Because every time you hold back from explaining, defending, justifying, you conserve your strength. You stop bleeding energy into people who don't matter. You stay focused on your lane, and you move with a kind of calm precision that's rare and unstoppable. Speaking less also makes you unpredictable, and in any competitive field, whether it's business, relationships, or personal growth, being unpredictable is a strength. When people can't read your next move, they can't prepare for it. When they underestimate you, they give you space to grow unnoticed. That's when you rise without interference. That's when you build empires in silence. The world moves fast, and everyone's racing to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized. But recognition before readiness is a curse. You don't want to be celebrated for a plan you haven't finished. You want your work to speak once it's strong enough to stand on its own. That takes patience. It takes trust. It takes the willingness to be underestimated for a while, to let others think you're not doing much, while inside you're moving mountains, you're building, learning, evolving, and when the time is right, you emerge not with promises, but with proof. That's what makes impact. That's what earns real respect, not hype, but results, and those results are born in silence. It's also about ownership. When you speak less, you claim ownership of your journey. You're not giving people room to co-author your vision with their doubts. You're saying, "This is mine, and I'll show you when I'm ready." That posture of ownership changes everything. It empowers you to keep going when things get hard, because your reasons come from within, not from the need to impress anyone. You're not chasing applause, you're chasing excellence, and excellence doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs time and dedication. When you learn to be your own witness, to validate your own growth without external praise, you gain a kind of freedom most people never touch. You stop being reactive, you become proactive, and that shift changes the quality of your decisions. You no longer need to explain why you're doing something differently. You simply do it, and you let the results show the wisdom behind your silence. In the long run, this way of operating creates a foundation that lasts. Because anything built under pressure to please others often crumbles when that approval fades, but what's built quietly, intentionally, from the ground up, it has roots, it can withstand storms, it can outlast trends. Your journey doesn't need to be loud to be real. In fact, the quieter it is, the more control you have, and that control gives you room to grow, to change, to evolve without judgment. You don't have to explain when you pivot. You don't owe anyone a play-by-play. You just keep moving, you just keep refining, and one day people look up and realize you've built something extraordinary while they were busy talking. That's the reward of restraint. That's the gift of speaking less. So remember, your silence is not emptiness. It's a container for strength. It's not a void, it's a womb for creativity. It's not hiding, it's preparation. Protect your plans. Let them grow in the dark. Let them become strong before you bring them into the light. Because once they're ready, once they're unshakable, once they're real, then no judgment, no doubt, no external voice can stop them. That's when you speak not with words, but with impact, not with promises, but with proof. And when you reach that moment, the silence that once protected you becomes the roar of your arrival. Keeping your circle small isn't about isolation, it's about insulation. It's the protective layer that surrounds your vision, your peace, and your growth from the noise of the world and the distractions of those who don't truly understand or support your path, because not everyone around you has your best interest at heart, and sometimes the loudest voices in your life can be the most misleading, the most energy draining, the most subtly toxic, feeding you doubt disguised as advice, discouragement dressed up as concern, and fear masquerading as wisdom. And when you're surrounded by many voices, too many opinions, too many perspectives, you start to lose your own. Your intuition gets drowned out by the echo of others, and your original fire begins to flicker under the winds of external influence. So keeping your circle small, intentional, and aligned is not only wise, it's essential, because your environment either feeds your energy or starves it, fuels your ambition or drains it, sharpens your focus or scatters it. And in a world full of noise, false friends, and distractions, choosing to walk with a few who truly get you is far more powerful than being surrounded by a crowd that doesn't, because in a small, trusted circle, there's safety, there's honesty, there's shared vision and mutual growth. There's room to be real, to be vulnerable, to fail without fear of judgment, and to rise again with authentic encouragement. And that kind of support is rare. It's sacred, and it's earned over time through shared battles, quiet loyalty, and unspoken trust, not through likes, follows, or surface-level validation. And when your circle is too wide, it becomes porous, open to negativity, gossip, envy, and distraction, and you may not even notice it at first. It'll start with small things, like someone questioning your dream in a passive tone, or constantly reminding you of how hard it is, or doubting your ability, not directly, but subtly, enough to plant uncertainty in your mind. And before you know it, you're adjusting your vision to fit their comfort, not your calling, compromising because you don't want to lose them, slowing down because you're waiting for their approval, and shrinking your light to make others feel more comfortable. And that's a price too high to pay for companionship, so you've got to be intentional about who has access to you, because your energy is currency, and if you spend it on people who don't invest back into you, you'll always feel depleted, lost, or second guessing your power. And here's the truth. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your dreams. Not everyone can handle your growth, your ambition, your evolution, and that's okay, because you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to fulfill your purpose, and that requires discernment, the courage to prune relationships that no longer serve your journey, the strength to walk alone when necessary, and the wisdom to recognize who actually belongs in your corner. Not those who just show up when it's convenient, but those who stand beside you when the vision isn't yet visible, when the results haven't yet shown, when the path is foggy and uncertain. Those who don't need convincing, who feel your calling without you having to explain it, and who push you to keep going even when you're tired, doubtful, or discouraged. Those are the ones you hold close. Those are your circle, and it doesn't need to be big to be powerful. It just needs to be real, because a small, committed tribe can carry more weight than a crowd of passive spectators ever could. And when you've got the right people around you, you move differently. You think bigger, you trust deeper, and you grow faster, not because they carry you, but because they walk beside you, mirroring your courage, reminding you of your worth, and checking you with love when you veer off course. And as you evolve, so too must your circle. Some people are meant for a season, a lesson, a chapter, but not the whole book. And holding on to what no longer fits out of guilt, nostalgia, or fear will only slow your journey. So don't be afraid to bless people and release them, to say thank you and move forward, to outgrow spaces and relationships without bitterness, just clarity. Because your purpose is bigger than your comfort, and the path ahead requires less noise, fewer distractions, and more alignment. So protect your space like it's sacred, because it is. Protect your energy like it's gold, because it is. And protect your mind like it's the foundation of everything you build, because it is. And the tighter your circle, the clearer your focus, the stronger your boundaries, the deeper your peace, and the faster your progress, because you're no longer wasting time explaining your value to those who can't see it. no longer apologizing for dreaming big, no longer diluting your energy to be liked, and no longer delaying your growth to drag others along who don't want to move. And that shift, that focus, that sacred protection of your space becomes the very thing that multiplies your power, attracts the right people, and accelerates your destiny. So yes, keep your circle small, keep it solid, and keep it sacred, because in silence, in solitude, and in intentional company, you find the clarity, conviction, and courage to build the life you were born to live. Staying silent when emotions are high isn't about bottling things up or pretending you're unaffected. It's about mastering your energy, knowing that not every moment deserves your immediate reaction and not every provocation deserves your response, because in those intense emotional spikes, when you're angry, hurt, shocked, frustrated, your words are most vulnerable, and if you let them fly unchecked, you'll often regret what you said, how you said it, or who you said it to, as the damage done in a few seconds of impulsive expression can take days, weeks, or even years to undo. And here's the truth: emotional silence is power. It's the difference between reacting like everyone else and responding like someone in control, because silence in those moments doesn't mean weakness, it means strength. It means choosing not to give your energy away to situations or people who are trying to knock you off center. And when you stay quiet in the heat of the moment, you're not suppressing your feelings. You're honoring them by giving them space to be understood before you act. Because emotional intelligence starts not with how well you talk about your feelings, but how well you manage them in real time, especially when they're raw. And this kind of control, this self-mastery, separates those who succeed from those who self-destruct, because the world doesn't reward outbursts. It rewards those who can lead themselves first. And to lead yourself, you have to know when to pause, when to breathe, when to hold your tongue, even when your ego is screaming to strike back, to defend, to prove a point, especially then, because that's the moment you have to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say aligned with who I want to be, or is it just a reaction to how I feel right now? Because feelings pass, but words spoken can't be unsaid, and sometimes silence isn't just the smartest move, it's the safest, because when you stay silent, you give yourself the opportunity to think, to recalibrate, to come from a place of clarity instead of chaos. And in that space between the trigger and your response, you regain control of the situation and yourself, because anger clouds your vision, hurt distorts your judgment, and stress rushes your decisions. But silence gives you perspective, and perspective gives you power, the power to choose a response that reflects your values, your strength, your long-term peace, and not just your temporary frustration. And think about how many times in the past you said something in the heat of the moment only to wish later you had said nothing at all. How many bridges were burned, how many relationships strained, how many opportunities lost, not because you didn't care, but because you cared too much and let the moment override your wisdom. And when you realize this, you start to see silence not as a punishment, but as protection. Protection from saying the wrong thing, from revealing too much, from letting others control you by pushing your emotional buttons, because people will test you, intentionally or not, to see how much of your power you'll give away when you're triggered. But when you stay calm, stay silent, stay grounded, you show them they can't access you that easily, that you're not here to perform or explain or defend, but to observe, reflect, and move with intention. And this doesn't mean you never speak your truth. It means you speak it when it serves you, when it serves the moment, not when your emotions demand it. And that distinction changes everything, because silence gives you the upper hand in negotiations, in arguments, in relationships, in leadership. It gives you time to listen deeply, to understand fully, to respond wisely, and that alone can shift the entire dynamic of a conversation or conflict. Because while others are busy reacting, venting, justifying, you're watching. calculating, preserving your energy for the right moment, and that restraint is rare, it's powerful, and it commands respect, not because you're loud, but because you're composed, and people feel that presence, they notice it, they sense that you're not easily shaken, that your power isn't based on being the loudest in the room, but the calmest, the clearest, and the most in control, and silence also gives you a chance to process what's really going on inside, to separate the story from the truth, to understand the root of your reaction, because many times what triggers us on the surface is just a reflection of a deeper wound, and if you don't take time to reflect before reacting, you'll keep repeating the same emotional patterns and calling it personality, when in truth, it's just unexamined pain, and silence invites healing by forcing you to sit with your emotions instead of projecting them onto others. It allows you to feel them fully without judgment, to explore them without shame, and that kind of self-awareness builds emotional resilience, so that the next time you're tested, you don't crumble, you don't lash out, you don't spiral, you simply breathe, stay silent, and choose a higher response. And the longer you practice this, the stronger it becomes, until one day you find yourself in a situation that would have once triggered you into an argument, an outburst, a meltdown, and instead you just smile, stay calm, and walk away, not because you're avoiding confrontation, but because you're prioritizing peace, because not every battle is worth fighting, not every comment deserves an answer, and not every moment is the right moment to speak. And when you develop the discipline to pause, to listen to your inner wisdom, to trust silence over noise, you begin to move through life with a quiet confidence, the kind that can't be shaken by other people's chaos, and in that stillness, you realize you don't have to prove your point to be right, you don't have to defend your character to be at peace, and you don't have to explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you, because silence is often the loudest statement you can make. It says, "I'm not here to argue, I'm here to evolve." And in a world where everyone is shouting, venting, reacting, those who can hold their tongue and control their state rise above the noise, because they're not pulled by the emotions of the moment. They're anchored in the clarity of their purpose, and from that place you make better decisions, build stronger relationships, and protect your mental and emotional energy from being drained by situations that don't deserve it. So the next time you feel the heat rising in your chest, the urge to speak before you've thought, the pressure to say something just to defend your pride, pause, breathe, and choose silence, not as weakness, but as wisdom, because when the dust settles and the emotions fade, you'll be proud that you held your power, that you stayed grounded, and that you didn't let a temporary emotion create a permanent consequence. And that, right there, is the real victory, not in having the last word, but in having the last piece. Your silence isn't empty, it's filled with more power, more meaning, and more clarity than 1,000 noisy words ever could be, because in a world obsessed with shouting opinions, oversharing details, and constantly explaining or defending oneself, choosing to stay quiet becomes an act of strength, not absence, and it's in that space of stillness where your power begins to rise, where your thoughts become sharp, your awareness deepens, and your energy gets protected from being scattered across meaningless conversations, unnecessary arguments, and time-wasting validations, because silence is the language of confidence, of certainty, of someone who doesn't need to announce every move or defend every decision. And the moment you realize that silence is a strategy, not a sign of passivity, you begin to operate differently, you begin to speak less and observe more, you stop trying to convince others and start trusting your own path, because you understand that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your plans, or your emotions, and the more you keep to yourself, the more powerful you become, not because you're hiding, but because you're holding your power close, guarding your vision and moving in alignment with something deeper. And when you walk in silence, you begin to hear what most people miss. You hear the intentions behind people's words, the lies behind their smiles, the envy behind their compliments, the distractions hidden in opportunities, and In that silence, your intuition sharpens, your instincts lead, and you no longer fall for the traps you once did when you were busy trying to explain yourself, impress others, or gain approval. And yes, it's tempting to speak, to clap back, to set the record straight, to prove your worth. But every time you do that, you give away a little piece of your power, you invite energy that doesn't serve you, and you shift focus away from what actually matters, because your greatness doesn't need to be announced. It needs to be built, protected, and executed in silence until it's undeniable, until your results speak so loudly that words become unnecessary, because people may doubt your silence, misunderstand it, or even mock it. But that's only because they don't understand the depth of your vision or the fire you're building behind the scenes. And when you stay silent, you keep them guessing. You stay unpredictable, and in that unpredictability, you gain an edge because people can't attack what they can't see. They can't sabotage what they don't know, and they can't stop what they don't expect. And when you stop broadcasting every step, you move faster, smoother, and with less resistance. Because energy flows where attention goes, and when you give less attention to noise, drama, and unnecessary commentary, you conserve energy for your goals, your healing, your creativity, and your growth. And in that silence, your mind clears, your direction becomes obvious, and your focus becomes unshakable, not because life is easier, but because you've eliminated distractions, the kind that come dressed as conversations, as updates, as emotional reactions, and even as friends who don't really wish you well. And silence lets you spot those people clearly, lets you sense their intentions without them ever realizing it, because when you're quiet, you notice everything. Who claps when you win, who goes silent, who listens when you speak, who talks over you, who supports you in private, and who only stands near you when it benefits them. And that awareness is everything, because life isn't just about doing, it's about discerning. Discerning where to put your time, your love, your ambition, your loyalty. And that level of clarity only comes when you slow down the noise and lean into your stillness. And if you look around, you'll notice something. The loudest people are often weakest, the most unsure, the most desperate for validation, and they scream to be seen, to be heard, to be admired. But those who are truly powerful don't need to prove anything. They let their work do the talking, let their actions build the narrative, let their silence create curiosity and command respect. And when you learn to sit in silence, not from fear, but from wisdom, you begin to experience a different kind of peace, the kind that comes from knowing who you are, where you're going, and why you're doing it. And that peace becomes your protection from all the chaos that tries to knock you off course, from people who want to draw you into meaningless debates, and from the temptation to explain yourself to those who have already decided not to understand you. And that's one of the biggest traps. Thinking you owe people an explanation for your choices, your path, your healing, your ambition, but you don't. You owe it to yourself to move in silence until you arrive, until you've built something real, something strong, something permanent, and by then you won't need to speak. Your life will be the proof, and that kind of success, that kind of transformation, is louder than any words ever could be. So don't be afraid to pull back, to stop oversharing, to keep things to yourself while you build, grow, and heal. Because in that space, you reclaim your power. And when you start showing up without saying a word, walking into rooms without trying to impress, creating without announcing, healing without posting, and moving without explaining, you become a force that can't be touched, a presence that speaks before you even open your mouth. And people feel that, they respect it, and eventually they follow it. Not because you asked them to, but because your silence became louder than their noise ever could be. Not everyone deserves to know your next move, your plans, or your inner world, because the truth is, the more you reveal, the more you give people the chance to interfere, judge, doubt, or sabotage. And while we're often conditioned to believe that openness is strength, that sharing builds trust, and that transparency makes us relatable, there's a deeper truth that reveals itself when you've been burned by betrayal, drained by gossip, or slowed down by the opinions of those who never had your best interest at heart. And that truth is this: Your silence is your shield, your boundary, and your secret weapon, because not every relationship is sacred, not every friend is loyal, and not every smile hides pure intentions. So when you keep your next move to yourself, you're not being sneaky. You're being wise. You're protecting the energy behind your vision. You're guarding the seed before it grows roots, and you're refusing to allow noise, doubt, or envy to take up space in your sacred process. And this doesn't mean you isolate or never trust again. It means you become intentional about who you allow into your mind, your heart, and your plans, because when you share too much with people who haven't earned that access, you give them the power to influence your direction, to project their fears onto your faith, to discourage your bold steps with their own small thinking, and before you know it, you begin shrinking your dreams to fit into their limited world. And the next move you make isn't aligned with your soul. It's been edited by the expectations and insecurities of others, and that's where the damage happens, not always from betrayal, but from misalignment, from trusting the wrong voices with the right dreams, from giving front row seats to people who secretly want to see you fail. And here's the real challenge. Many of those people won't look like enemies. They'll look like family, friends, colleagues, even mentors. But pay attention, because if they can't celebrate your growth without feeling threatened, if they need you to stay small so they can feel big, if they smile when you're stuck but go silent when you rise, that's your sign to go quiet, to pull back, to stop offering updates and start moving in silence. Because not every relationship is meant to grow with you, and not everyone clapping for you is cheering from a pure place. Some are clapping just loud enough to stay close and watch you fall. And if you're not careful, you'll hand them the blueprint to your downfall while thinking you're just sharing your progress. So protect your peace, protect your process, and understand that privacy is power. It's how you stay focused, grounded, and immune to distractions. And when you make a habit of keeping things to yourself, you begin to see who's really aligned with you, not based on what they know, but on how they show up even when they don't know, because real supporters don't need details to cheer for you. They trust your direction even when you're quiet, and those are the people you keep close. But the rest, you keep them in the dark, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, because when you've got something valuable in your hands, a dream, a vision, a transformation, you don't expose it to careless energy. You protect it, you nurture it, you water it in silence until it grows strong enough to stand on its own, and by then, you don't need to speak. Your results will introduce you. Your glow will reveal the work you did in the dark. And your life will be the proof that staying quiet was the smartest thing you ever did. Because when you stop explaining and start executing, everything changes. Your peace increases, your clarity sharpens, your circle improves, and your power multiplies, not because the world changed, but because you changed how you moved in it. And silence becomes your superpower, not your weakness, because while others are busy talking, you're building. While they're debating, you're doing. And while they're watching, you're elevating. And by the time they realize what you've done, it's too late. They can't stop it, they can't copy it, and they can't claim credit for it, because they never even saw it coming. And that's the beauty of keeping your next move to yourself. It gives you the space to grow in peace, to fail without an audience, to pivot without judgment, and to succeed on your own terms. And the more you practice this, the more powerful it becomes, because you'll notice how much energy you save when you're not constantly updating people, how much more focused you are when you're not distracted by reactions, and how much more confident you feel when your moves are led by purpose, not applause. And that's what true success looks like. Not being loud, but being clear. Not being flashy, but being intentional. Not being seen, but being unstoppable. And all of that starts with silence, with the quiet decision to build in private, grow in peace, and let the world find out only after it's done. Because silence doesn't mean you're not moving. It means you're moving differently, with more wisdom, more discipline, and more power ever before, and in a world that thrives on oversharing, your silence will confuse people, even offend them, because they've grown used to having access to your every thought, your every step, and your every struggle, but that's not their right. It's a privilege, one you grant only to those who have proven they're worthy of it, and the rest? They'll just have to wonder, because your silence isn't for them. It's for you, for your growth, your healing, your evolution, and your freedom. And once you taste the peace that comes from keeping your next move to yourself, you'll never go back to giving it away again.